Good morning, everybody. We'll just get started in a few minutes. Okay, good morning, everybody. See that people joining us, which is great. Thank you for joining us for our webinar, the first in our series for the autumn-winter series. I can't believe we're there already. And today we're going to be talking about understanding the benefits and the value of a CRM system. So really just to go through some webinar etiquette, some of the boring part of it first. What to say is that the session is going to be recorded. It will be available on demand afterwards on the website, so you will be able to access that later on today. You'll see there's a Q&A box, and this is for any questions that you have for any of the speakers. We really do encourage questions throughout the session because we want this to be as interactive as possible and answer the questions that you have. So please do put any questions that you have into the Q&A box. You'll also see that there's a chat box, and that's really for more any technical questions or general questions for us as organisers. So if there's any questions around that, please put them in there. And my colleague Rebecca is in the background and she is keeping an eye on those. So I'm Joyce Harman. I'm Senior Client Relationship Manager at Hart Square, and I'm absolutely delighted to be joined today by Chris and Catherine. Chris, if you could introduce yourself, please.
Yeah, thank you, Joyce. I'm Chris Gilbert. I'm Head of Technology and Services at Hart Square. I have been a consultant, so I've kind of been delivering projects for a large part of my life, and now in my role I oversee sort of how we deliver those projects and the technology that we use and the partners that we work with.
Fantastic, thank you, Chris. And Catherine.
Catherine Zara, and I am Head of CRM Delivery at the Children's Society, and I have worked on various CRM projects in the past and also from an operations perspective within fundraising and higher education.
Fantastic, thank you, Catherine. And as we'll be talking about later with Catherine, Catherine's in the middle of a project at the moment, so she's got some really great insights around that as well. So really looking forward to talking to Catherine and Chris in a bit more detail. So just quickly, for those of you who are not aware of Hart Square, really just wanted to point out we are a consultancy practice and we work only in the not-for-profit sector. And it's really important that everything we do is around our independence and our impartiality, that any of the recommendations we make or any of the guidance that we give is purely based on the needs of our clients and nothing else. So just really wanted to point that out. So before we go into in a bit more detail, I just wanted to run a quick poll. So if you bear with me while I bring this up. So what we are asking this morning, just to really give us a bit of a flavour of who's with us this morning, is what stage are you at in your CRM journey? So are you considering a CRM project and exploring what the benefits could be? Are you currently reviewing your current system, looking to see what improvements could be made, what are the benefits you could get out of it? Or understanding the best way to track and realise those benefits, or if it's something else other. Also, it would be interesting if any of you that are in the other, if you can put that into the Q&A box as well, and if there's something we can see that we can cover that as well, because it'd be interesting to see. So let me just let that run for another second, and then I will share the results. It's quite an interesting mix at the moment. Okay, so I'm going to end the poll and let me share the results. So I think it's quite an interesting mix, really. So there's about 28% of people that are considering a new project, a new CRM project, and looking at what the benefits are. But I do think it's very interesting that 41% joining us today are reviewing the current system. So I think that's very interesting. You have a system in place already. What else can you do? What other improvements could be made? What other benefits are there around that? So that's really interesting, and we can definitely cover that off. And then, yes, the best way to track and realise your benefits, absolutely, because there's no point in sort of identifying the benefits, but if you don't, keep a constant track and an eye on them, how are you going to know if you're actually going to achieve anything around that? So let me just stop sharing those results. So thank you for that. So when we talk about a CRM project, or we talk about the benefits of a CRM, one of the things that we always say to our clients is that a CRM project should not just be simply seen as a technology project, because it is so much more than that. It is the key to your strategy and your culture. And whenever we're talking to clients, you will always hear we're talking very much about what is your strategy, what is it you're aiming to do over the next 2, 3, 5 years, what are the changes that you're trying to bring in to improve the situation for your staff, for your members, for your supporters. What is the reason that you're embarking on this project? Because the CRM system, it's a tool that enables people in the organization to more effectively carry out their roles, that ultimately is all working towards achieving the various strategic goals, whatever they may be. But that the people and the strategy, the culture, they're intrinsic to any system. And in order to have a successful CRM implementation, you have to bring the people along. You have to constantly be thinking about how does that link to the strategy. So your people and your strategy should be at absolutely the forefront of any CRM technology project. It's really, really important to drive that way forward. So not thinking of it as a pure technology project and forgetting about the people. If you're thinking about benefits, it's much more than just we need to get this new piece of kit in. It's a much bigger picture when you're thinking about benefits. So what do we actually mean by benefits? So this is a conversation I have a lot with people, and particularly around the first one, the financial and the dreaded return on investment. Now, it can be very difficult, and particularly this is where boards of trustees, senior management or FDs are very much focused on what is the financial implications going to be? What money are we going to get back from this huge investment, this huge spend? But as we would, the money can't be forgotten about, but there is so much more around it than that, because even from a financial side of things, bringing in better efficiencies will have an impact on staff time, bringing staff time back to be able to do all the other things that they haven't been able to do until now. So, time is a financial benefit as well, allowing people to do other things. But looking at improvements for staff, so again, it could be looking at better efficiencies, getting rid of your data that's in spreadsheets all over the place, bringing everything into one place so that people can actually easily access data, easily access the information that they need. All of those different types of things. So there's an awful lot of things that can be done around improvements for staff. And ultimately, at the end of the day, you want to have happy staff. You want to have staff where technology is improving their day-to-day working and it's not hampering it. So very much thinking about the staff side of things, but also thinking about improvements for your supporters or your members, your donors or your volunteers, depending on the type of organization you are. By bringing in a more efficient CRM system, you can have much more personalized communication with them, much more tailored communication with them. It's very much thinking about how they interact with you, how they want to interact with you. So that can then have long-term benefits of either, better renewal rates and more, funds coming in, more donations coming in, or more uptake in volunteering. There can be many, many different things. But I suppose the important point here is to say, it is, when you talk about benefits, it's not just one of these, it is all of these. And within all of these, there is, endless lists that can go on below it. So when you're talking about benefits and you're putting forward your business case for doing this project, either getting a new CRM or improving your current CRM, very much thinking on the wider picture and not just focusing on the financial side. So examples of some of the benefits. So this is on the projects that we work on, but also the clients we work with and some of the things that we see in the sector. And also we do a research study every couple of years, which we are doing one at the moment, which we'll be, I'm sure, inviting you all to fill in, very much understanding about what the benefits people are getting from a CRM. So for me, one of the biggest things is around that single member view or single donor view or supporter view, again, depending on what type of organization you are. Bringing all of your information away from those disparate systems. Very often what we see with organizations is that there will be some information in an email marketing system, there will be information in lots of different spreadsheets, there's just information all over the place. You have inquiries coming in via the website, but they could be forms that then need to be uploaded into the CRM. There can be lots of different things. What the CRM can do is bringing all of that information into one place so that you've got that single view. You can go in for any member and say, these are all the different interactions they have had with us over the year. These are the kind of things that they're interested in. So we can personalize and tailor our communication more accordingly. Engagement analysis or engagement scoring as well is an interesting one, because it can, you know, for a membership example, when it's coming up to renewal times, it's very much around thinking, okay, what do we think our renewal rates are going to be like this year? By having some kind of engagement scoring put in, you can see, you know, has this member done any CPD this year? What courses have they attended? Have they downloaded any papers? Have they made any inquiries? And you can see then, well, maybe they haven't actually done anything for the last 8 months. And so therefore, when it comes up to renewal, to say there's a highly likelihood they're not going to renew because they've had no engagement with us. So possibly looking at putting together, you know, pulling out the data of the people that have less engagement and doing a campaign to them to try and up that engagement before it comes down for renewal time, which leads on to that campaign analysis. Again, it's having everything in one place. Very often, you know, with campaigns, and particularly a lot of the charities we work with, they're running very, very big campaigns. But being able to do proper analysis to see off the back of that campaign, you know, what funds came in, how did they come in, you know, what did we get more gift aid uptake from them? Did we get more people signing up to you know, run a separate activity for them? All of those kind of things. So you're doing all that analysis in one place. Then the ease of accuracy and reporting, it might sound like a really simple one, but this is a huge challenge that we see all the time. And it's one of those things for a client I'm working with at the moment, they've been embarking on a very big CRM project, but from a sense of a kind of a quick win that they really wanted to get with the CRM project, and it would be a huge benefit to the organization, but a very simple one, was that the senior management team could not run reports or could not get regular reports on the information that they needed. So setting up the dashboards that are there on their home screen to see that the reports that they need, that they can go in and they're there and they have them. That is a huge benefit to the senior management team for them when they're thinking about strategic decisions and all of that. But the important point as well is then coming on down to data that's consolidated and can be trusted, that those reports can be trusted. Because very often when you have a lot of disparate systems or spreadsheets, your data is all over the place. By bringing all of that data together, you know that you can trust that information. Again, a client I've been working with recently, because they had a lot of different membership levels and that information was held in lots of different places. They couldn't really say that they have 100% accurate data on their member numbers within that. So by consolidating all of your data in one place that can be trusted, because you know it's been, you know, there's governance around it, it's being checked, you know that your reporting is accurate. Then streamlining your processes, again, bringing in better efficiencies, that mean that staff can focus on all the other things that's on their very long to-do list that they never get time to do because they're spending hours and hours every week uploading or downloading spreadsheets. Then talking about integrations to other systems, so I'll move on to that now in a second, but one of the things that people often forget is when they think about the CRM is that integrations piece. So when talking about the value of integrations, really, I just wanted to put this up as an example. So a CRM system these days, a modern CRM system, can do many things. So if we look at sort of the spokes of this wheel, these are all different elements that can be done in a CRM system, and a lot of people don't appreciate this. So you can obviously the reporting and dashboards, but you can do gift aid management, training and events. You can have case management, obviously contact management, because generally that's what a CRM is for. You can do payment processing, pipeline management, opportunity management, email marketing, fundraising. You know, this isn't the definitive list. There is lots more things. But it's a really good example of what a CRM can do. And a lot of the conversations we have with clients is when we start looking at projects is a lot of these on the spokes of the wheel are separate systems. And then therefore your sort of your IT estate or your kit, your list of kit can become very long and unwieldy. And very much what you should be doing and looking at around benefits is where can you rationalize down the spokes of the wheel to bring these into the CRM, because then you have less systems to manage, but again, bringing all your information and data into one place so it's easier to manage. And then from that, integrating your system into some of the other external systems that you have, like your website. These days, you know, your CRM and website, you know, having that seamless connection so that you can see, you know, what people are looking at on the website, what are they downloading, but importantly, things like forms or inquiries, they're seamlessly integrated into the CRM, so that you're not having to go in and manually upload forms and things like that. And then there's other things like if you have an EPOS system, the HMRC gateway, if you have an e-commerce platform, and finance integrations. It's very common these days for the CRM and finance system to be integrated. A lot of FDs obviously don't like that idea in some cases, but there's different levels of what that integration can be. Is it one way, two way, and all of those different types of things. So integrations is something that really needs to be thought about when you're thinking about benefits, because there can be a huge benefit in consolidating in and putting everything into one place. And then finally, before I bring in Catherine and Chris, just really want to talk about the benefits tracker. So really this can be as simple as an Excel spreadsheet. And what you're doing is right at the start of the project is you're agreeing all of the benefits that you're aiming to achieve with this project. And again, the point is this should not be one or two things. This should be quite a long list, because you need to think about all the teams, the departments that are going to benefit from this, and list them all out. The important point is that they're documented and that you're being realistic around the timeline, because not all benefits are going to be realized immediately on go live day. For example, it might be that you want to move to direct debit payments for renewals. Your renewals run might not be for another 12 months, so therefore you will not see that benefit realized until then. And there's various different stages in between. Or for example, you go live and you've managed to set up your dashboards and your reporting for your senior management team. That could be done on day one. So documenting the timeline along those benefits. Very importantly, agreeing who is responsible for delivering those benefits. So they're the people that are going to be keeping an eye. Where's the project going? Are we on track to deliver that? Has something happened to mean that we can't? Do we need to revise that timetable? And that not waiting until the end. This really must start at the beginning of your project, and then reviewing and updating through that whole life cycle of the project, constantly saying, where are we with this? Do we need to do anything? Is there a challenge here? But also importantly, making people aware right from the start, managing their expectations around when the benefits that are going to benefit them the most, when are they going to happen? When will they be realized? So that people don't expect they're going to get everything on day one, if in reality the benefits for their department might not be realized until phase 2. So enough from me. I'm going to bring in Chris and Catherine. So as we were saying, we know there are many conversations around the benefits of a CRM. But really, it's about more defining, what do we mean by benefits? And as I said, there's a belief that it all has to point to the financial ROI of things, and that a project isn't successful if there isn't lots of financial ROIs around it. But that, as I said, can miss, some really positive impacts. So I'm really interested to get both your views on this. So Catherine, could you tell us a little bit about your background, about yourself, and the projects that you've been working on in relation to CRM?
Sure. So my background started way back in finance recruitment, and I actually was a systems trainer for a CRM implementation. And I think that showed me how not to do a CRM implementation, particularly don't decide in December that you're going to go live in January after Christmas, particularly when working with recruitment consultants, because most of them are still recovering from Christmas until February. So it probably was a little bit hard for them. And also what I learned from that was around processes. If you haven't got your processes right, it's very difficult to then apply it to a new system if people aren't clear as to how they're going to make how they used to work in the old system, how they move it to the new system. That's going to be very difficult. After finance recruitment, I moved into higher education, and I worked on community engagement platforms, which linked back to CRM. So it's more of the front end, and then tracking back how we manage information back into a bespoke CRM, moving into career CRMs. So with that respect, that was more, I inherited as a head of operations, a very large CRM, which had been updated and personalized by previous members of staff in the organization who had access to the back-end code, but they were only updating our version of CRM, despite it actually any global updates happening by our supplier would wipe out any changes. So my first role there was actually to clean house and get us to a stable position with the system, because the problem you've got, if you've got somebody who's making changes all the time on your system, but then a global update happens, everything's going to fall over. So you have to just get your system stable. So a lot of my work there was getting things stable. And then with the pandemic hitting, a lot of it was about changing up how we actually delivered a lot of our tools and front end things for a virtual environment. And then from there, I've moved to the Children's Society. Oh, sorry, previously I also have implemented Raiser's Edge in a previous role. But then conversely here at the Children's Society, I joined in April 21, and my role has been to remove Raiser's Edge, which we have now finished. We went live on August 10th with our Dynamics, and replace it with Dynamics. Yeah, so do you want me to talk about our benefits as well? Sorry, Joyce.
Well, yeah, all of this, I mean, you know, Catherine, amazing experience, and obviously that's why we asked you to join us today. So I thought, yeah, so because as you say, you joined halfway through the project at the Society, you know, so would you say that from the original goals that were outlined, you know, had they changed, and when you started, you know, was there a clear definition of the benefits?
So when I joined, we had so I know we're going to talk about it a bit, but we have a phased approach with our project. We have 3 phases. I was brought in to lead on the phase 3 of the project, which is the largest phase, just in terms of number of supporters, number of donations, which we were going to be migrating across, and also the fact that we were leading to closing down our legacy systems, Raiser's Edge, and moving everything into Dynamics. There was a phase 3 paper, which interestingly focused a lot on the financial ROI. But when you actually dug under the surface of what fed that ROI, it was actually quite, it would have been difficult to achieve, because the very nature of bringing in a CRM is a lot of it was around staff saying, oh, well, now we have a CRM, we can automate everything so we can make savings on staff. And unfortunately, my view at this time is that doesn't happen, because actually you may remove one element of somebody's work, but then you are implementing, particularly with something like Dynamics, a very complex and very, the opportunities, what you can do with CRM is amazing. So you have to caution against thinking that CRM is going to replace people, and that's where your ROI is. Instead, we looked more about the supporter and the stakeholder staff experience. Back in 2016-17, the Children's Society did develop a new supporter engagement strategy in the face of what are we doing into the future to reach we have a goal of Destination 2030 about reversing the decline in children's health, and really just in terms of the fact that we are seeing more issues around mental health, more issues around not enough government spending on young people, more people using food banks, more issues around children getting exploited. So the idea was to, by 2030, we are working in projects which reverse that trend. However, we need funds in which to do that, and we need supporters in which to help us to achieve that. So the supporter engagement strategy was formed to support that strategy. An audit was run on our systems, and it was recognised that Raiser's Edge would not be able to support in that strategy. So they defined it a lot around saving money, a lot about some of the better data management tools. But in the time between 2017 happening and 2021, which I joined, not only has it been a 4-year gap, it also been a global pandemic. The world had changed somewhat, the way we work had changed. So they really need to be looked at again. So we pretty much did, I kind of refocused it back. I broke it down between what are changes, what are benefits, what are enhanced capabilities, so that we could actually pull out what the benefits are rather than what are nice to haves or what's actually just always going to happen if you change a system. And a lot of it, whilst we wanted to look at improved data quality, improve self-sufficiency, we have increased automation of some of our processes. A lot of it also was about assessing and bringing clarity to our processes. We didn't necessarily have it written down and clarity around how we actually process a gift. We knew how to process a gift, and the team were incredibly successful at processing a gift. But when it came to actually identifying, well, what are the steps you do, we actually had to look at that. Also around campaign, you mentioned about campaign analysis. We do huge campaigns at the Children's Society, online campaigns, and yet we do have some disconnect between how the data is collected on those campaigns, how it goes into our system that we use to send out all our emails and stuff, and how we then get that information out. So I actually brought in an additional business analyst into the project, whose role is to better manage and actually put forward better ways of working around our campaigns analysis to ensure that the data we put into CRM actually supports the benefit of getting better data out and better analysis of how we're doing.
That's fantastic, Catherine. I mean, there's so much to unpick there, and I really like all the points, but I do particularly like your point as well about the ROI and the staff, because that can often be the thing that, well, we can get rid of staff because we're going to save money that way. That is never the reality at all, and also sometimes it can be a barrier for people engaging in a project, because if they think the goal is bring in better efficiency because we're going to reduce headcount, that equally has a really negative connotations for trying to get buy-in for people on the project. Chris, I wanted to bring you in. Can you tell us a little bit about your background and your experience of what have you seen of benefits that have the most immediate impact on the organisation or the team?
Yeah, so my background, as I'd mentioned a minute, I have been a consultant delivering projects for a very, very long time, and a large portion of that has been on sort of multi-phased, multi-year implementation. So benefits tracking has always been something that has been an interesting one, because I think over those different projects, as over the years, maybe 8-9 years ago, it was less of a focus. I think if there was any focus, it would be maybe on the financial aspect and not much beyond that. But certainly, I would say since then, the idea of needing to track wider benefits, communicate those with all of the people that they are going to hopefully impact positively, that seems to have been really sort of understood now as being a fundamental part of projects. I think, though, what I have seen is being some of the most fundamental improvements are with newer technologies, and there are, the majority of new modern technologies, CRM focus for this conversation, but more widely than that as well is the ability to both self-serve as a user. So you actually have your hands on your own data and can kind of report, and you're not going to another team to provide you insight, but also the capability, and whether you as an organization decide you want to take this route or not, but the ability to actually change that system and configure it so that it meets your needs as your needs change, rather than having something that is a very functional and potentially robust but very restricted framework that you have to use, and to kind of do anything beyond what it does on day one, it's workarounds, and it's kind of little, might even just be, we use a spreadsheet for that, and we just have to kind of manually tie the data together. So that idea of internal ownership as well, your destiny kind of being a bit more in your own hands, that has a huge impact on teams that maybe in the past have been using something which hasn't really been fit for purpose, and they want to do something new, they want to do something slightly different, categorize somebody in a different way, or create a different type of piece of information. In the previous system, that might simply have been, oh, well, sorry, we can't do that. Whereas now in more modern solutions, it's, yep, fine, we'll roll that out to you, and we can prove that we can do that. And it changes the whole concept of why there's value in using a CRM. There's a benefit in the wider sense for all parties to play a role in maintaining it and making sure it's up to date and still fit for purpose.
Perfect. I really like that. Your destinies in your own hands. That's a really good one. Catherine, I know you've briefly talked about this already, but you took the phased approach on the project, and I was just wondering, did you find that gave you an opportunity to deliver some of the benefits earlier on?
I would say yes. I need to emphasize that I wasn't in the project at phase 1. And I think phase 1 was tough for the team because the team were quite small at that time. They were given quite a big task, particularly as the Children's Society hadn't done a project of this scale. They were successful and they did brilliantly. But there were some initial challenges around that, just as from a learning curve. But for phase 2, there was a definite immediate benefit. Phase 2 was focused around volunteering. Our youth impact volunteering was used to be managed via this homemade access database. It was quite cobbled together. It was complex. It had fields all over the shop. Whereas the team worked really closely. They ran towards CRM. They were like, we just want to get rid of this access. So they developed better processes. They had better clarity on their volunteers, and they were also better able to manage safeguarding as well, which is a huge piece of work at the Children's Society. So it was hugely beneficial. For phase 3, we're just coming up to our first month. I would say, I can't comment the immediate benefits, but one thing I would say is that we closed month end this week with no delays. Everything was fine. We have had teams already actively using the system. So I think the benefit has been people are engaging with the systems and they want to get involved. So the benefit is that people are not neglecting. With Razor's Edge, people were quite, they didn't always trust the data. They didn't always trust that it could do what they needed it to do, whereas already we're seeing people actively and proactively reaching out to us, asking questions. Everyone's better trained on the system as well. Before, Razor's Edge training was quite ad hoc. Now we have a systems trainer. We have formal training courses. Everyone has to attend. If you don't attend training within a certain time period, you can only have read-only access to CRM, so that limits what you can do. And so, yes, and I think we also, with phase 3, we were better able to anticipate some of the challenges which we were encountered in phases 1 and phase 2. So the team had learned from things in phases 1 and phase 2, and also learned to, dare I say, communicate better with individuals. We learned nuances around how to flex our style across different teams, depending on who we were working with. So that did massively help with the success of phase 3.
Fantastic. And we have lots of questions coming in, Catherine.
Okay.
You'll be delighted to hear. So we will try and make sure we get to as many of them as possible. Chris, what is really your experience with regard to phase projects? Do you find that clients want to go for that big bang approach? And if so, does that have an impact on when they're going to start realizing benefits?
I'd say now a phase project is generally, I think, the one that we would say is the more common. I think Big Bang used to be, almost the only sort of perceived option with regards to implementing something. But Big Bang, I think it definitely has a place. I think it's about understanding the scale of the change that you're trying to bring about, and whether you can get to a point where everybody on a certain day starts using that solution, and there might be lots of different reasons for that. It might be there might be contractual restrictions. You need to get off something, and there's an absolute deadline for that. But there's pros and cons on both sides. So really, before getting into the delivery of the project, I think it's really important to have had some time spent focusing on what those implications are, because with the phase project, I mean, as Catherine has mentioned, in terms of 3 different go lives, somebody's going to go first, so they're going to be a bit of a guinea pig for the project, and the kind of the new world you're moving to. Somebody's going to have to be last as well. So how you order those phases and why, and again how you communicate that, it can be really sensitive with certain teams. That it might be the team that has been struggling the most with how they currently have to work, either within an existing system or just in spreadsheets, that you might have to say to them, look, for these very good reasons, you're not going to go first, you're going to go maybe third or last, or wherever it might be in your order of phases. And that alone can then give people a very different perception of the project if that's not well managed. So there's still a place, I think, for sort of a big bang, but I think it needs to be understood, what the requirements for your organization are, and whether you have the staff, the time, you know, the in some ways the kind of bloody mindedness in some cases to just barrel through lots of really difficult work in a very, very strict timeline, because you know that if one piece of that falls out, your whole timeline is out. So it's a big decision to make, but there are lots and lots of options around it.
Perfect, thank you. You know, we've touched on you know, developing and putting together a benefits tracker. So Catherine, you know, did you put any kind of benefits tracker together for the project, or, you know, if not, do you think that would be useful to do going forward for the next phase?
So as I mentioned, I redid the benefits, and I'll be honest, we didn't track them through previous phases. I think it would have been very useful, building on the points Chris just made, for phases 1 and 2, because it goes on for multi-year. Our project has been a multi-year project. It would have reminded stakeholders of what the team had achieved and what the project was bringing, or the CRM was bringing back to the charity. And I think it's very easy with change. I mean, I could rattle on for, Chris will know that I could rattle on for ages about change and how you need to get a change consultant, but I'm still sore about that. But it's very easy for stakeholders, if they go through a change and you haven't managed it properly, for them to hark back to the good old times of the old system, despite them always saying, actually, it doesn't work for us. So I think a benefits tracker massively helps to remind people of why you were here, what you were trying to achieve, and to demonstrate the journey you've been on to get to where you are now. We have done it informally as part of phase 3, but I do think has been a gap. I'll admit it's been a gap in our project that we haven't more effectively tracked some of the benefits. But I would say what we have done around some of the core teams, particularly our team which is responsible for processing income, and our team that is responsible for all our data selections, we have always caught up with them, and we have informally had really great conversations of where they have seen benefits based on just one small thing around, we now have an automated Just Giving integration, which has saved one member of our team a whole day's work, which we can throw back into the pot for data selections. And from an income processing perspective, whilst they have had to come to terms with using a new system, it hasn't impacted anything around how they process month end, and we actually have a much more stable system, because Razor's Edge around mail merging was a little unstable for them and might not work some months. So we now have stability, which is a huge benefit, because it means we can continue to thank our supporters in a timely manner as well.
Perfect, thank you. And Chris, I suppose really from your point of view on, you know, what's your view on putting together a benefits tracker?
I think they're hugely valuable, but I suppose I would look at them almost a bit like when people sort of start talking about KPIs. I think unless that they are very clearly able to be tracked and assessed and actually tied to a timeline and some really clear outcomes and ways to measure them. I have worked on projects where I think that there have been benefits which have been tracked, probably in inverted commas, but that have been quite vague. So, you know, better working practices, or, you know, more streamlined processes. That's so opinion based that you know, a team that actually could have massively improved their processes, but maybe that actually means that they're under more pressure, or they're going through a bigger change. If you just ask them, do you feel that you work in a more streamlined way now, they might say no, but actually the reality is that what they used to do and what they do now is been, you know, impacted hugely by a new solution, and there have been many positives. So I think absolutely it's something that you can lay out across your project, and also don't lose the things that you will benefit from through the project. So it's not just about a tracker that says, right, on day 1 of our go live, or our first phase going live, all of our benefits begin there. There's benefits in bringing together a team to run a project. There's benefits in being able to show to an organization that maybe hasn't got a great track record of delivering projects, and doing that in a well-managed way, that actually being able to start and run that project and show people that you can be brought into that is a huge benefit. You know, just proving that it's viable to run a project like that. I've seen being almost the biggest transformation for some charities, particularly that we've worked with, where it's just saying, yeah, everything that's happened before. It's not about, you know, that we are just innately enabled to run anything like this in a kind of a way that's well managed and that can stick to a budget and a timeline. But what we can actually do is show that that's not a cultural issue. That's just, you know, other factors, but we can prove that going forwards we can do it, and it has a huge impact on the wider organisation to do that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I suppose, you know, we know what these projects, and as I said earlier, this, you know, it is really all about the people, and very often there can be a challenge around getting buy-in from people. So I suppose, you know, Catherine, from your side, you know, did you have any specific, you know, communications out to the wider team, you know, to help them understand, you know, the impact of this project, you know, was going to have on them and what the longer term benefits it was going to bring?
Yeah, I think we were in a good position in that we had very strong buy-in at senior level, which is a credit to our project sponsor. And they were very good at managing, because we have to get approval for such a large project from trustees. They were very good at managing expectations around that. There was, when I joined, I would definitely say there was a waning of interest and awareness of the project outside of our subject matter experts, because it had been going on a couple of years by now. And we also needed to re-engage the steering group. So we had a steering group, but on our first meeting, there was like virtually no one showed up apart from the project team. So my first job was to try and we had to, with the steering group, is a little bit more reminding them of their responsibilities. We relaunched the terms of reference for steering. We relaunched SMEs, subject matter experts, as ambassadors, because at the point I joined, subject matter experts had been one way to us, but had then gone back to their teams and not told anybody about what they've been doing for the past 2 hours in terms of capturing user stories. So they were shown to be ambassadors, because their job was not only to tell us what they wanted, but to PR the project back. Varying success. Some people fabulous, some people not so fabulous, but we also then did regular things. We had fortnightly emails to all our ambassadors, and we used to give them a copy paste update. So even if they didn't want to talk to their team, all they had to do was copy paste in an email to their team, this is what's happening with the project. So just to keep up that memory and that reminder. And then 8 months out of go live, we launched countdown to go live sessions, where we would give a talk. We would remind people about why we were doing the project. So all the benefits, this is what we've done so far, this is the work we've got to do. And we did them on a quarterly basis, quarterly and monthly, it depended, varying where we were in the project, to talk through where we were with the project, how far we had to go, and kind of expectations as well for ambassadors and users as to what would be happening. So people were fully informed. They knew when training was going to happen. They knew when we were going to, because we had to do a read-only period on our existing systems, what was going to happen during the read-only period, and then when we were going to go live. So it was just about giving as much information as possible to as many people on a very regular basis, so they knew that we were there.
Yeah, I mean, that's fantastic. I can see that would have made a huge difference, because you know, the communication piece is really important. I suppose, Chris, from the projects that you've worked on, you know, do you think the benefits have been communicated, you know, through the delivery and beyond? You kind of, in general, how well do you see that's done?
I would say it's pretty variable, and I would say because comms in a project, certainly a long-term project, are probably the easiest thing to decide that they're not as important as anything else happening on the day-to-day. You know, the points at which projects get a bit gnarly or a bit difficult, the kind of the comms channel and you know, when you communicate and what you communicate can sometimes be a case of, we don't think that it's a good time to communicate, let's kind of see if we can settle things down, or it just doesn't stand out as being a critical thing to keep on top of us. I mean, Catherine's example is there, and I know they've done a huge amount of work to really make sure that those are continually rolled out to teams and everybody's kept on board. And I think that's the kind of the gold standard in doing that. There are obviously degrees, But I think if you really want to try and make those benefits a reality, I think you have to be communicating them all the way through, so that it's almost part of it is almost I think about people setting themselves a level of expectation. You know, you told us that this was what the solution was going to give us, or how we were going to be impacted by it in a good way. They should be able to hold a project team to account over that as well. If you've made a big thing of it, you've set out exactly how it should impact them, then quite rightly you should be able to then show where that's been the case. And if it hasn't, you know, that might be for lots of different reasons, but I think it's really important to make sure that that's not forgotten about, and that you don't just kind of roll into different phases and go lives, and the benefits are almost well, you kind of work them out yourself. You know, do you again, more opinion based, and is it a feeling that you feel that you've improved as a team, or you've had some greater benefit, rather than something you can actually point to that's more tangible than that?
Absolutely. I'm really conscious of time because we have had lots of questions come in. So if we don't get to all the questions, we can absolutely follow up with them afterwards. But Catherine and Chris, just quick, as sort of kind of a quick top tip. I'll come to you first, Catherine. So the quick top tips for anybody, you know, embarking on something like this and thinking about how are we going to measure and track all our benefits. Is there any sort of burning top tip you would give them? And then Chris, I'm coming to you with the same question.
Well, actually, I wrote a note on this because I said, and I don't know whether this will help you realize benefits, is one of my top tips is that you need more people than you think, and that you need more budget than you think. Always best to pad that budget as much as you can. If you don't spend it, it doesn't matter. You give it back to the charity. It's, you know, but pad it. We have successfully padded our budget, and it has meant that we have been able to do things and bring in people to get things done quickly and more effectively and efficiently than we would have done otherwise. And don't underestimate the small tasks. We have a small integration, which is to help with our data selections. It has been one of the biggest headaches of our project. This small integration has actually turned into a time suck and budget suck. We're going to get there, it's fine, we're going to sort it, but never underestimate something which is, oh, it's relatively small, we just switch on this API and it's fine. So always be aware that there's going to be some gremlin somewhere which you would never even anticipate at the beginning of the project.
Perfect. So, right, I'm going to pick out some questions. So let me see, what is the best one to go with? So I suppose one of the first questions that come in is, we are a small charity. Do you think it is still worth implementing a CRM, and how techy should one be to implement a CRM, you know, and in practice, which I think is a really good question. Catherine, I'll come to you on that first. I was
going to bat that one to Chris.
I'm going to go to Chris now, but I suppose from how techy do you need to be to do these implementation projects?
So I am head of delivery for TCS, and I have a degree in history and sociology with a focus on gender and feminism. So I would say you're not traditionally techie. You need to have a mind for understanding how things can shape and how processes can work, but you also have to understand how techie you have to be, and there are some very technical elements of implementing a CRM, which you then require specialist individuals to do it. So I think you have to pick where you apply your people, but there is a point where you need somebody who's able to look at the bigger picture, is able to do the project management side of things, and you also need somebody who is going to be very techie, who understands, let's say with Dynamics, who understands how the Azure environment works, who understands how to move, how we use Kingsway Soft for our data migration. Again, that's using SQL, it's using technology I do not understand. So I think, yes, you do need to be techie, but you just need a techie person or persons. And in terms of small charities, yes, and there are, I would say it depends on the size of your charity. Dynamics is massive. It is as big as you want it to be, but there are lots of tools on the market and platforms in the market which are aimed at small charities. So don't think Dynamics, Salesforce and Razor's Edge are the only ones. Do your research, because there are some really good platforms out there, much smaller, probably much more able to help a smaller charity as well, build it to how they want it to be. So I think every charity needs a CRM, but just don't think there's only 3 CRMs for you to pick from.
Absolutely. Okay, yeah, Catherine, I love that. Absolutely, 100% agree. Chris, was there anything else you would add on that? I mean, I think Catherine fabulously summed it up.
No,
But,
no,
yeah,
no. I
any
think I'm worried about my own role at the moment. So no, covered everything.
One of the questions that came in around the benefits around is there benefits around data protection and GDPR? Chris, do you want to cover that by bringing in a CRM, data protection and GDPR?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose benefits are, being flippant about it, that you don't end up in the paper, or upsetting your kind of supporters and things. I think probably the way to flip it would be about the benefits really being able to better communicate with and more accurately support and work with those that you engage with. I think there is very commonly, the idea of a CRM project that we would see is it's about collating lots of disparate pieces of data that maybe you might exist as a person to that organization in 2-3 different places with different kind of hats associated to you. There's no way that you can then be communicated with in a holistic way that is as efficient and as likely to endear you to want to support that organization. If you're getting all sorts of different communications at different points that seem to be either contradictory or pulling you in lots of different directions and expecting you to either give your time or money or your campaigning kind of focus, whatever it might be. So I think it's got huge benefits. Obviously, it is also internally a hugely important and critical component to make sure you're compliant and that you're very clear. A lot of projects we work on, as scary as this is to kind of contemplate, considering when it was that GDPR kind of came into being, projects are actually the thing that finally nailed down some key policies around GDPR. That have just always been, well, we're kind of working that one out still. And you think, well, if it's not sorted out now, you've missed an opportunity, and also you probably can't implement that solution as well as you would like to, or maybe at all, because there are going to be some fundamental decisions that have to be made, and this is going to be the point at which you need to make them.
Yeah, perfect. I'm going to pick this question around data just because I love talking about data, as Chris knows very well. So, Catherine, and you can throw this one to Chris as well, Catherine, if you want. But the question was around, is new data coming into a staging area for review, clean, to merge prior to loading it into live? If yes, is reviewing, cleaning, merging done manually, or have you managed to automate this cumbersome task? So the fun thing about getting new data into the system, is that something that so I suppose, Catherine, for you, is that something that's going to continue manually, or this is now much more an automated process? And then Chris, I'd like your opinion on automating of that upload of data. Catherine.
So the $1 million question, right? So we have a complex way of various ways that data comes into our system. You can enter data directly into CRM. We do not have a staging platform for entering data that way. So let's say we get a gift in via, I'm going to make it up, via a standard bank transfer, and they're a brand new donor. Our supporter team will just enter that information in. There's no issues there. The bit where it does get tricky in that we have staging is that we use a product called Engaging Networks to send out all our campaigns, all our emails. Engaging Network doesn't necessarily always collect the data in a nicer way that fits CRM. So previous to Dynamics, we had one person whose job was 4 days a week to tidy up the data and get it back into Razor's Edge. Now, as part of the CRM project, my aim was to get rid of that process completely and automate it completely. Unfortunately, we have not been successful in automating it. So yes, we do for Engaging Networks, which is a huge bulk of data. It does go through a process, but what we have managed to do using Kingsway Soft is automate the cleaning of that data to a certain degree. It's still not perfect, but it is a point where it comes, because it's a third-party system, it's coming through. We are making some changes and it is coming in, but we do not have a direct policy at the Children's Society that we manage or clean all data before it gets into CRM. It's just one particular tool where we do, which is the bulk of our data. It does come through. But my vision going forward for CRM is actually that we look at what opportunities there are outside of using engaging networks, particularly within Microsoft, to see if we can improve how we capture information from our campaigns. I hope that kind of answers the question, but it's never straightforward.
No, absolutely. And Chris, I was going to ask you to comment on that, but I'm conscious of time, and I do want to ask one other question, which, again, Catherine, I will ask you to comment on, but Chris, I'll come to you on this first, because I do have a view on this as well. So the question was, did the fact that Dynamics was not bespoke for the not-for-profit sector, in brackets like raises it to thank you or care, mean that development was more expensive and the project went on for longer? I suppose, Chris, maybe, you know, I suppose touching on the fact that the importance of that the technology partner, there's lots of different Dynamics ones, and by finding ones that sort of specialize in the not-for-profit sector. But I don't know if, Chris, if you wanted to comment on that first, and then Catherine, really, we're running out of time, unfortunately.
I'll try and do a very quick answer then. I mean, I think that probably was the case, but a number of years ago, we were talking probably 8 to 10 years ago, maybe, where you could say, well, they were sales platforms and therefore they've been kind of bespoke. But now both, I mean, really with Salesforce and Dynamics, they've both invested as companies into fundraising kind of layers to them, but also there are so many proven solutions now that really I don't even think it used to be a bit of a sort of a throwaway probably from competitors of those platforms that was, oh, they were their sales platforms at heart. I think now with the amount of proven solutions that are in the marketplace, but as you say, Joyce, I mean, what you do not want to do is to go with anybody, in my opinion, I think probably in our opinion at Hart Square, who has either a vague understanding of what fundraising is to start with, because that absolutely does impact then why something is built and the way it's extended out, even if there is a core solution, but also anybody that says, oh yes, we can build that for you, when it's just a fundamental part of fundraising. You know, fundraising broadly, there are only so many ways you can do, you know, and manage major donors or legacy giving or individual donors. You know, that there's a kind of a good sort of framework within there, so that if your tech partner is asking you lots of questions that make you feel like they are having to kind of come up with these things from scratch, I think that's a big risk, and it would be a warning sign from our perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. And then say, just conscious of time. Catherine, I didn't know if there was anything you wanted to add to that, or if Chris has kind of covered it.
No, and I think you have to remember as well with Dynamics, a lot of what we've built is core, exactly what Chris was saying, is core. We have a layer which is some of the fundraising side of things, but you also have to remember, you know, Microsoft is starting to see this as a potential area for development for their product. I'm not sure whether Microsoft have quite got it yet, and I am aware of some charities who have tried to work directly with Microsoft and have potentially struggled with delivery and support from them. So I think if you think about it another way, in that it actually is helpful having a tech partner on that journey with you to help you develop, to help ask those challenging questions. Whereas Microsoft, because they are such a huge global organization, theirs is very much we ask them to do something and they do it, or take a long time about it. Whereas at least with a tech partner, you might get some of that challenge to make sure that you are actually building the right things for your charity.
Absolutely, and I think that's a perfect point to end on. So I'm sorry that we didn't get to all the questions, but we're very happy to follow up with any of them afterwards. And thank you everybody for being so engaged. But particularly thank you obviously so much to Chris for being my wonderful colleague as always, but Catherine, that has been utterly invaluable. I mean, your knowledge and insight is just fantastic. We could happily talk all day long, but I have my project manager head on making sure that we finish on time. So just to say thank you both for joining us. It's really, really appreciated. And to everybody else joining us this morning, thank you very much for joining us, and hopefully we'll see you again soon on another webinar. Thank you.